In this video we are going to see the same route map statements, but this time the route maps we are using to deny the routes entering into the routing table. Like we can say simply route filtering using the route maps. In the previous video, in the first lab, we have redistributed these routes into RIP, so from RIP into OSPF, right? And then we try to include some of the routes. Different routes should get different metrics. So we have configured some route map statements where we have configured some ACL matching two different types of networks and then redistributing them along with the route map statement. Now in this scenario, I'm going to use a route maps to filter the routes. Like if you remember, we did the same thing with distribution list also in our previous videos. So the requirement here is I want to make sure that these routes should not enter into my router 2 routing table. So they should be denied when they enter the router 2. So we did the similar task in our distribution list. Like if you remember in the first videos, we have seen you are using a distribution list where we have used an access list which is going to match specific routes. Then we have also seen a distribution list where we have matched with some respective prefix list statements. And then now we are going to do the similar task by using a route map statements. So in case if you are using a route maps, how we are going to deny those specific routes getting into router 2 routing table. Like I said, route maps are more sophisticated way of defining a specific networks than access list or prefix list. Let us take one simple example here. So I'm going to take the simple scenario here where we have all the 3 routers are configured inside any one of the IGP protocol. Like in this case, I'm using OSPF here. I'm going to configure all the routers in area 0. So if you are going to continue with the same lab like what we did in our previous route filtering using route maps, we can just remove the RIP, okay, and then advertise into OSPF, or you can just start up with a basic initial configuration. That is up to you. So assuming that all the routes, whatever you can see here in the diagram, all the routes are advertised in OSPF area 0. So what we are going to do is, so I'm going to continue with the same configurations here like what I have in my previous lab. So this is my screen here. So on the router 1, I have a OSPF which is pre-configured. To verify, we can use show run pipe symbol section OSPF to verify the configurations on the router 1. The 10 dot network and 1 dot network are already advertised in area 0. So on the router 1 I have already the configurations, and on the router 2 also I do have the configuration similar way like we did in the previous lab. On the router 2 also this 20 dot network, 1 dot and 2 dot network are already advertised inside the OSPF. And on the router 3 I'm going to remove the route map which I created in my previous video lab, and then I'm going to router OSPF and I'm going to remove the RIP configurations because in my previous video I have used advertised these 13 dot networks in RIP, so I'm going to remove that. And then finally I'm going to advertise those 13 dot networks inside my OSPF domain. So I'm going to make it in area 0. Done. So if I finally verify the configurations of what I'm expecting here, show run section OSPF, you can see on the router 3 the loopback, the LAN interface and the WAN interface, everything is advertised in area 0, and by default OSPF will not do auto summary. So if I go and check on the router 2, I can see all the routes coming into my routing table. Now what is my requirement here is I want to deny, configure the router 2, or we can say router 3 to deny all the 13 dot routes should get filtered from the routing table of the router 2. We are going to use one line ACL and using a route map statements. Means I'm not using any distribution. Anyway, I have to use distribution list, but here we are going to use deny the routes inside the route map itself. Okay, so we are just trying to understand how to use a route map statements in case if you want to deny a specific route. So let us see here. So in my case here I got a syntax here. the first thing I need to define these networks. So these networks, whichever I want to define, I have to use an ACL statement. In that ACL statement, I have to define those specific networks. So I'm saying anything starting with 13 with a wildcard mod 000 means anything starting with 13 I'm going to permit here. So now why we are going to permit when we want to deny the routes? So that might be the question. So we are going to permit here and we are going to deny inside the route map. So it's very important to make sure that the way you write the ACLs and route maps varies. Like if I'm using permit here and if I'm using deny in the route map, which means these routes will be automatically denied. And if I use deny in the ACL and also I use deny inside the route map, it is going to permit the statement, because deny means it is opposite meaning. So deny just will be permitted. So you should be very well aware of these combinations. Suppose if I say deny here in the ACL, then we have to define a permit inside that. So which means the permit inside the route map will have the exact equal to meaning of whatever you define in the ACLs. So this is something you should be very well aware of this whenever you are using the combination of access list along with the route maps or a prefix list along with the route map statements. So in my scenario, I'm going to define permit inside the ACL, which means it is going to match only the networks, but it is not going to deny here. Okay, so I'm going to deny when I'm defining a route map. So I'm going to say in this ACL statement, I'm saying match all the network whichever starts with 13, and I'm saying in the route map statement itself, route map CCIE, instead of using permit 10, we are using deny 10 here. And what routes are you deny? Whatever the match IP address 13 means, whatever the networks I define in the ACL 13, those routes must be denied. And then I'm saying route map CCIE permit 20, which means all the remaining routes has to be permitted. And then finally I'm using a distribution list inside the OSPF, because these routes are getting into the OSPF. I'm saying distribution list route map, refer the route map CCIE means it is going to deny all the routes whichever defined in the ACL 13, and then it is going to permit all the remaining routes, anything going out of S1 by 0, which means just a minute, it's not out of S1 by 0, it has to be in of S1 by 1, because we are going to implement on the router 2. Okay, so let me correct that one. It should be in of, I was just thinking I might be doing on, okay, so in of S1 by 1. Okay, fine. So let me just start up the configuration here. I'm getting into my router here, and on the router 2 I'm going to configure a access list which is going to define the network. So I'm going to use the ACL number 13 itself, and then I'm going to say permit all the networks whichever starts with 13, and then 0.255.255.255, which means anything starting with 13. And then I'm going to say route map CCIE or CCNP, any name you can use, and then I'm going to say deny 10 here. So which means whatever the statements which matches under this statement, under this route map, will be automatically denied or automatically applied in opposite meaning. Okay, so if you say set something, it's not going to set for that routes. So I'm going to say match IP address, I'm going to say 13, nothing but match these networks, and then there's nothing to set, so probably we are just matching here just like a distribution list. And then I'm going to say route map, the same name CCIE permit 20. So if I give show route map, I can see the first class is matching these networks and then denying it, and in the second class it is going to match all the remaining routes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply it inside the OSPF, router OSPF 1. So I'm going to apply this route map here. So I'm getting into router OSPF 1, and then I'm going to say distribution list, and I'm going to say I'm not going to use any ACL to match the networks here. Instead I'm going to use a route map statement to match the networks. So route map, and the name of the route map, it is CCIE, and then I need to define the out direction. So after that you can see here, so it's not out direction, it has to be in of, because we are doing it on the router 2, right? So on the router 2 it should be in direction here because the routes are coming from router 3. And then if I use question marks, there is no interface option, so it is going to deny all the routes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the routing table to refresh the routing table. So once I verify my routing table one more time, you can see from the router 3 I'm able to see the routes coming from 30, but I don't see 13 routes because the routes coming from 13 will be automatically denied here. So this is what finally we should expect the output. Now this is a very simple route map statements where instead of using a normal way, like normal traditional way of using distribution list by using a prefix list or an access list, we used route map statements. So this is something which we need to a little bit aware of, how to use your route maps inside the distribution list also.